This episode, we are joined by Laurent Baldoni. Laurent went from being a producer to an integrative psychotherapist. He combines various therapeutic approaches to help individuals overcome anxiety and limiting beliefs. Join us as we discuss self-discipline, authenticity, and personal growth in today's podcast.
All good. All right.
Okay. Welcome, Laurent. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great. So, Laurent, what I want to kind of do is to give a little bit of a background about yourself and then eventually get into what you're doing right now and basically explain a little bit what it is that you do right now. So starting with the background, as far as I know, you started in advertising, no? Or maybe even before that.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how far you want to take the context. So I guess starting off, as the name suggests, I'm half French. I was born in France. As the accent suggests, I then grew up in England. My mum's English, my dad's French. So I grew up, I guess, fully bilingual, fully 50-50. That influences who you are, right? Context,
100%, yeah.
Context in who we are is all important, as it is in therapy, of course. So that's the sort of the background in terms of professional work. I started out in the film game, yes. Started at the bottom, became an assistant director eventually, and then a producer. Traveled around the world, eventually working more in Spain in the last sort of decade or so, and then got fed up with that.
I hear that. But as a producer, I'm guessing there's a lot of psychology involved. So you have to manage the client, you have to manage the crew, you have to make sure that everybody works together, right?
Yes, I would say ideally, yes. I'm not sure if everybody functions that way. I would like to think that that was prevalent in how I produced. Certainly looking after the crew, managing that sort of triangle of the local crew, the client agency visiting crew, and then the local production company who have their own interests, of course. And you're kind of juggling those balls and trying to do that as best you can. As a producer myself, I think it's fair to say that the human element was important to me. And funnily enough, since I've changed, a few people have sort of commented on that they could see that empathy, let's say, in some of what I did. Didn't always get it right, of course, we're human. But the intention was definitely, yes, to, I guess, employ some psychological values in terms of looking after people, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm living proof. I worked with Laurent, as I told you before, Joshua, many times, and it was quite good. Honestly, years after those events, it was pretty good. It was always human, and you always felt like he got your back, which with producers is very hard to find. Sometimes producers are all around the client, and they don't give a shit about the crew. The crew is expendable. Nobody cares. And with Laurent, you kind of got the other feeling, like he's gonna get your back first and then the client, which is rare to find. So, muy bien.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to talk in that. It's not right, and this is something that we talk about a lot in therapy. There's no right or wrong. It's just how I used to do it, and obviously, different people will have different views on that. I think it's wonderful that you have that view. People that I'm close to have that view, and we share values. And
it wouldn't be here if I hadn't.
Well, exactly. But there are plenty of people that would see that differently and say, no, you should look after the client, and that's important, and that's more important. I mean, you just said, for me, humans were more important than the client. I would say that's probably true. I would say that the line wasn't, I can't swear on this program.
You can do whatever the fuck you want.
It's not about screw the client.
Yeah.
The client is important, but the humans getting the job done, to me, were more important. Now, not everybody saw it that way, and that's why certain production companies, I guess, loved working with me, and others perhaps less so, and that was a natural filter. And there was a moment in my career where I stopped doing things because I thought that that's what people expected me to do, or a producer expected, was expected to do, and I started doing what I felt was right. And that was a huge moment in that world, because it was like a release, and it was a big weight off my shoulders, and I could do exactly what I felt was right. Now, naturally, there's going to be that filter. Some people are going to say, well, no, we don't want that. For us, it's all about the client, and I'm not spitting on that. I'm not saying that they're wrong. It's just not in line with how I saw things. And then naturally, I gravitated towards companies and clients because some clients, also shared that view, that shared my worldview. And that's obviously a nice way to work, because then you're surrounded by people generally that share your values, and that makes life a lot easier.
It does. I'm sorry. It just...
Yeah, I would like to know, like, how and when did that change of view and the way of working come about? Like, what triggered it, or what was the process for you to move from one way of working and managing things towards more the team-centric or the human-centric way of working?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. And it kind of taps into where I guess this is going to go, which is, what I'm doing now. And I think for a long time, I was kind of self-taught in terms of how on earth can I be happy, right? That question that so many people ask themselves. And, I went through some tough times on a personal level. I know what it's like to look over the edge of the cliff, to be in that black hole. And at the time, I wasn't reaching out. And I'm not going to start preaching and saying that therapy is the answer to everything. By the way, that's not at all my attitude. At the time, I didn't do it. I did later. But at the time, I was just figuring stuff out by myself. It was trial and error. This works. This doesn't work. Sometimes I would still do the things that didn't work. But, it was that kind of hitting rock bottom, I guess, for me. And I'm not playing the victim here. It was my journey, my experiences. I've led a pretty privileged life. But in my case, it was what was rock bottom for me. And it was like, shit, I need to do something about this. And in my case, it was a bunch of stuff. It was, I wanted to get my own place. I wanted to be independent. Work was a factor. And I just wanted to be a better person. I felt like a good person inside, and I'm sure lots of people can relate to this. I felt like a good person, but I found myself behaving in ways that just weren't in line with that. And I thought, that's weird. What's going on there? And I was curious. I've always been curious. At school, I was curious, annoyingly curious. All my teachers will tell you this. Some took it well, others less so. But, I like to understand stuff. I like to understand people. I wanted to understand myself. I like understanding others. So in that moment, and I remember it, it was something needs to change. And there was a list of things. Okay. Now, obviously, most of those things, and this is something we talk about in therapy, were external things. So that's valid. Where you live, how you, what you're doing for work. They're all external things. I mean, work's really important because we spend so much of our lives at work or doing work. And then it took me a little bit of time to understand, hang on, the main thing that you've got to look at is yourself and look inside. And that was the last stage of that journey. But in terms of work, yes, there was that moment, and consciously I said, fuck this. I'm not going to do this stuff anymore. I don't care what happens and I've had this conversation with friends. I said, if people stop calling me, that's fine. I'll take that on the chin. But I need to be able to do it the way I want to do it. And that doesn't mean I was like this megalomaniac at work saying, with these rigid, of course, the client sometimes has demands that I thought were absurd and you just kind of have to do it. But I mean, in terms of values, in terms of human values and looking after the people involved and looking after myself and putting boundaries in. And that was that. And it was definitely a before and after moment.
So you kind of lined up your values with your work, with your life, everything went on line. How did that make you feel? Did it feel better? Did you notice a change?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that 100%. And I think if you live, and again, these are themes that we talk about a lot with clients in therapy. If you live authentically, if you live true to yourself, that's going to be pretty helpful in terms of, your general well-being and happiness level.
Yet you still got fed up with the producing. How did this change occur? What happened? Was there a break?
So there's another interesting question. I mean, that again is very personal, and I'm always very careful when I talk about this because I don't want to seem ungrateful towards a career that gave me a lot. It gave me a certain amount of financial stability. I'm not going to be on any sort of top lists of rich people anytime soon, but I could buy a flat, I could pay the mortgage for that flat, and generally, take little breaks when I want to and go out for dinner, which is the life that I want to lead. I wouldn't have been able to make the change if I didn't have that financial security, if I hadn't paid off the mortgage. Changing careers, it could fall, you could fall flat on your face. Thankfully, it wasn't the case, but I had that stability and that backup, that I knew that I could have no clients for 6 months and still put food on the table. So, and it also gave me, slightly counterintuitively, a lot of self-confidence, which I didn't have. I was a very insecure kid. I had very low self-esteem. And the fact that I was successful in that industry and pretty successful, I think it's fair to say, that gave me a self-confidence that I didn't have. So I'm incredibly grateful for what it gave me. But like so many other habits, mechanisms that we have in our lives, whether it's defense mechanisms, coping strategies, they serve a purpose for a certain period of time, and then that runs out. And that industry, basically, as I got older, it's just the basic values that, still went against, over and above the fact that I'm kind of done with getting up at 4 a.m. and doing 16 hours, and it was just tiring, and I wanted to live a different life. I wanted to get up, a little bit later, do a bit of exercise, start my first client, maybe have time for a coffee with someone, and just be more in control of my life. And the thing is, there is, when you're on a job, that job owns you. However much you try and put boundaries in, which I was successful at doing, I was much happier in that second part of my career, but it's still the industry that it is. You can't change the industry, and nor am I so arrogant as to think that I'm right and that I have to change the industry. So my relationship with that industry got to a point where I knew that I couldn't be happy. So that environment had to change. And that's what happens. And I've been looking for a while for a sort of get out clause, but I needed to find something that I felt passionate about, that wasn't just another job, that I could also get fed up with. I needed to feel a genuine passion and a desire to get up in the morning and to do what I was going to do.
And right now, what's the name of the therapy you do?
The methodology,
yeah, it's like there's a specific name.
Integrative therapy.
Integrative therapy. How did you reach this, and why did you approach this?
Great question. I need to go back a bit. I tried some things like well-being breaks and type retreats, those kind of things, but it didn't float my boat in the same way, and it felt like producing again. It was just organizing stuff, and that's not what I wanted to do. As a child, I was a performer. I acted, I wrote, even in school. Yeah, I used to write sketches with other school kids, and we perform them at school. So that creative side of me was kind of forgotten as a producer, because it was more about doing, organizing. And I didn't want to get back into that. And actually, you're kind of part of this story, because
that's new.
Yeah. Maybe you don't know this, but well, not you, indirectly. It's there was a period a few years ago when a few people in my life were going through some stuff, right? And they were calling me, and we were sort of chatting about stuff, and over a period of time, a few of them said, you've been really helpful, and have you ever thought about maybe doing something like this? Because it's not just like a mate giving advice. Like, you have a certain knack and a certain skill, a certain way of listening, a certain way of feeding back that is a little bit more than that. And I thought, well, that's nice, and that feels good. But I didn't make the connection. I've always been, as a side note, interested in I then eventually did my own therapy, which was amazing. I've always read books on psychology. I've always read books on CBT. General sort of therapy psychology has always been sort of in my area of interest. And after that period, we went for dinner. There were some friends there, one of your friends whose girlfriend was there that I didn't know. And we ended up chatting. I was chatting to this person who I didn't know for quite a long time. And then she said, have you ever thought about becoming a therapist? And I thought, well, this is someone who doesn't know me at all. This isn't like a mate being polite or just kind, And that was...
This is actually an honest opinion.
Yeah, well, it felt like that. And it just got me thinking, because I thought, well, you know, why not? Have a look. And that's all it was at the start. I did an online psychology course, which I quit very quickly, wasn't in love with the sort of more traditional Freudian, psychoanalysis, etc., which, again, I want to be clear, there are some incredibly valuable parts to that, but I didn't want to focus on that. Then studied holistic psychology, which was much broader and really interesting. So counseling was in there, Gestalt was in there. There was a lot of really interesting theories, some of which I connected with, some with which I didn't. And that then gave me the window and a bit of experience and knowledge to then get more specific in terms of psychotherapy, counseling, and CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And it was as I was studying those different things that within those courses, the term integrative therapy popped up. But interestingly, before I knew what that term was or what it meant.
Could you define it for us?
Yeah. So basically, it's a flexible form of psychotherapy that leans on different theories and approaches and uses the specific tools that you think, in this case, that I think are most beneficial to each client in each moment. So it's not rigid. It's not like it's just Gestalt or just psychoanalysis. And I love Gestalt, and I think psychoanalysis and psychodynamics are really interesting, and childhood obviously influences who you are as an adult. But things like CBT are kind of more here and now and pragmatic and cognitive in the way we think, obviously influences how we feel and how we behave. So that's really interesting to give people kind of tools and homework as well to do in between sessions so that they're practicing skills outside of the sessions, which is ultimately what life is, right? Life is going to be, I'm not going to be with them forever. And the idea is to build independence. But so as I was studying these things, I liked a lot of them. And I thought, well, why can't these work together? And I remember as a client, when I was looking for therapists a while back, I was kind of thinking, but, what do I choose? There's so many, somewhere between 450, 500 psychological theories out there. Okay, so how on earth do you choose what's right for you as a client? And I get that. And what I think this brings is that flexibility. And I think that my clients kind of appreciate that, because it's not rigidly trying to force an idea down somebody's throat. It
sounds great. Depending on the client, you use either this tool or that tool or the other tool.
Yeah. And it's important to clarify, it's not like I only do CBT with Juan or whatever. It's maybe Juan needs some psychodynamics and we'll go back into childhood and we'll do certain things with them at one stage. And then in a later stage, I'll give them, we'll do some CBT type things as well. It's really listening to the person, number one. It's that person-centered approach, which is the basis of counseling. It's really listening, being supportive, non-judgmental, being genuine, being kind, being empathetic, and creating a safe environment so that person feels comfortable enough to open up and be genuine as well, because obviously they need to be honest as much as possible for the process to work, and they need to trust you for the process to work. So that's kind of the basis. And then once you're in and that's been set, then you're constantly picking up signals and going back to the creativity. That's what I love about it. I'm not just regurgitating the same thing every time. I mean, of course, there's overlaps between clients, of course, but it's every client is a new challenge, and you start from scratch. And that's really cool for me, because it's right now, what are we going to do? And that challenge, I think, is beautiful. And it's of course it's hard work, but it's hard work that I like. And that's the difference between what I did before.
You wake up happy, right?
Well, it's just that joy of thinking, what are we going to do today? And of course I do my notes. I do quite a bit of work outside the sessions about where I feel we could go, but then I'm always open to reading that person in each session and sort of trying to pick up, the little signals of what might be useful that time.
And one more question. I've grown up in Argentina, where whenever you met a girl that studied psychology, you ran for the hills, because normally this girl was trying to fix herself, because she started out at a very crazy point. This made myself very untrusting or mistrusting of psychologists in general. Do you think there's any truth to that? Were you yourself trying to fix you, and that's why you study psychology?
No is the answer to that, but I can fully see that some people do. And this might be slightly controversial to say, but I probably feel more cynical now of therapy than before, because now I understand how it works. I can see how it can be misused and how people can do it for their own ego and their own narcissism. It's not the case with me. Why? Because I'm 45 years old. So it's slightly different, you know.
You solve your issues already?
Well, exactly. I mean, well, I want to be clear as well. I don't want to sit here and think that, oh, I'm sorted, I'm amazing. But yes, I'm in a happy, stable place. The insecurities don't disappear. You just get a lot better at managing them. It's a lot less intense and a lot less often, which is what life is. It's not perfect. So in my specific case, no. Do I think that exists? That personality, for sure, 100%. And because it's always easier to kind of fix other people than fix yourself, right? You have that objectivity. Excuse me. Whereas, you know, looking inside is tough. You know, admitting flaws, admitting that you need to work on yourself, challenging yourself. You know, challenging your current mental model, understanding that the way you think currently is not necessarily helping you. That's, you know, that taps into the I'm not good enough, the famous, you know, the probably the biggest belief that holds us back. And you know, to a certain extent, it triggers that. If I need to challenge myself, it means that I'm currently not good enough, right? But the payoff is really worth it. So yeah, I think in answer to that, I don't think I could have been a therapist, or I certainly wouldn't have been successful. I wouldn't have picked up clients straight off the bat as I have now at this later stage in my life. If I'd done it, you know, at university or something, I didn't have the life experience. I didn't have the maturity. I didn't have the emotional maturity. I didn't have the emotional intelligence. I didn't have the emotional stability. I didn't have any of those things. And those things came later in life. Do I wish that I knew some of the things that I know now then? Sure. But you know, that wasn't the case.
And everything leads up to something else, right? You need to learn certain things to be able to do other things. And probably your issues throughout your life, or the things you overcame, brought you to where you are right now, you know?
Well, I think that's a really good point. You know, I think that's a really good point. It's kind of important to look at the here and now. You know, I think we can tend to get a little bit lost in the past. And that's not to devalue the experiences that everyone's had. You know, everyone's had, you know, everybody carries baggage. Everybody's had some kind of difficult experiences, maybe even traumatic experiences. But the important thing is, where am I today? And if today I'm not in a good place, then today I have the power and the choice and the responsibility to improve that. It's not anybody else's fault. Right now, as of today, you have that choice to overcome that and to be happy and stable and balanced, etc.
Very good.
Would you say that, I mean, the way, the style of your therapy is, you, as I hear it, you have some knowledge, or a lot of knowledge about different aspects, different theories, and then by not being so strictly committed to one, you basically can still have the more human approach. The way I see it is, the people basically need you. They don't need a therapist. They need a human being with a lot of different capabilities, who then can actually listen and apply the approach necessary. And what I see in you is that, I think, me personally, I think that's the way to go. And what you said about the life experience you've had, like, I studied psychology actually, and I was 23 at the time when we started practicing the one-on-one therapy with other people. And I was just like, this is ridiculous. Like, you cannot, these people, including myself, we cannot help anyone at this point in our lives. And I would say, I don't know if you would agree, but I think kind of from what you said you did, is that most people, they need more like an actualized human being who's been through life and who also has knowledge about, like, first-hand knowledge about certain things, instead of a trained individual in a certain like cognitive behavioral therapy or whatever, like a lot of young people becoming a psychologist but lacking the life experience. I always doubted, and that's why I, in the end, ended up not being a psychologist, because I was always doubting, like, does this really help? So what is your take then on like psychology in general, like training people to be a psychologist? Do you think it has value, or when should someone decide to be a psychologist, at 18 or at 40? Like,
that's a really good question. There's a few really good things that you said there. First of all, you talk about a human being, and then you talk about an actualized human being. So Carl Rogers, the sort of father of counseling, talked about actualizing tendency, right? That as humans, we have a natural tendency to improve and develop and all that kind of stuff, but that process is blocked in some of us, and that's what we try and sort of unblock so that they can naturally themselves develop, right? It's empowering. It's not us fixing people. We just help them to fix themselves. So absolutely, a human being is really important, really, really important. I don't know if I would say instead of a trained therapist. I would say as well as, probably. I'm not sure if it's one or the other, but I think that human element, and again, this is just a personal opinion and a personal value, I think the human element is so important, because when you're creating that trust and that rapport, which is key to any therapeutic process, they need to feel connected with you. And that was what I personally didn't like so much about the more traditional psychoanalysis and Freudian approaches, is that it was a little bit colder. It was a little bit, I'm the therapist, you're the patient, in fact, not even a client. So there's something wrong with you, just with that word, the patient. And that's not kind of more modern applied psychologies. It's certainly not the way that I think, we are on a level playing field, more or less. Of course, I have more knowledge in that field. But the way that we operate, I don't talk down to them as if they're idiots that know nothing. On the contrary, I talk to them very much on the same level and help them to come to the conclusions that I think would be beneficial to them. So I don't spoon feed them and say, do this, do that. This is what's wrong with you. It's more about a conversation, Socratic questioning, clever questions, or at least I hope so, that help them get to those conclusions. And I'm just thinking, even this week, some really nice breakthroughs with people that were a little bit resistant, because of course it's delicate as well, because of that whole, I'm here, but I don't want to be here because it means there's something wrong with me. And how do you manage that and manage that insecurity and that ego? But, when they see what you're kind of thinking, but without you telling them, that's beautiful, because they feel so good about themselves. Do you know what I mean? And that's the human element. I'm not domineering, I'm not dominating, I'm not the all-seeing, all-knowing person. We're colleagues in this, we're collaborating. So the human element, super important. I don't know if I say instead of, because it's so subjective what's going to work for you or anybody else. Okay, I would like to think that the fact that I have a flexible approach opens me up to a wide range of different clients, and that's the case in terms of what they present. Male, female, ethnicities, problems, age. Age maybe less so. There's a lot of that mid-30s to mid-40s bracket, which is when I think a lot of people start to realize, hang on, the mechanisms I have in place are no longer serving me. But there's a variety. So yeah, I don't think it's, this is one of the important cognitive distortions in CBT is black and white thinking. It's not or this or that. It's about what works for you. And in terms of when should someone do it, when they're ready. That's the only thing I can say. It's not a clear-cut answer.
But I would say it's difficult for people to understand when they're ready, because a lot of people do study psychology, I think, to try to understand themselves indirectly or try to help people. But that's just my personal belief, is that it's more beneficial. Both, you're probably a more healthy person that knows yourself and can make the right choices at 30, at 35 than at 18. So I would say
notice when you do not notice when you're 20.
Yes, that's why we now raise the entry for being a psychologist. You can start studying at 30, at 30 or 35. First, get some life experience. Get your get a relationship, break up, go to the gym or get super fat and just go through shit, and then if definitely then you're like, yeah, I want to share what I've been through and I want to understand the human being more, I think then we would have a better base. Because I also think from the client side, I always think if I'm a 50-year-old and I'm getting into a depression, I go to the psychologist, and that's like a 24-year-old or like even a 30-year-old, like with little life experience, or someone who knows the therapy well and for obvious reasons is not psychologically healthy themselves. Maybe they're extremely overweight, which in my opinion or just like overweight could be an indicator that probably psychologically there's something not super good. These are always both from my side, why I have a difficult time like trusting therapists that would go to therapy, and also think like many people, I think you have to have very high standards. You have to, as a therapist, you have to adhere to very high standards to say like, I am a therapist and I'm going to help people, because basically you have a lot of upside potential if you do things well, but also you can make things a lot worse for people because they end up trusting you. And if you're not healthy, I mean, there's a reason why we have the distance sometimes between clients and therapists. Like the clients can fall in love with you because there's this rapport you're building. If you're not a psychologically healthy person and you're working with people of the opposite sex, that can lead to a whole list of issues. So that's why I would say, like, the first, making sure you're a psychologically healthy individual yourself, get some life experiences like you did, basically move through life, build a career, and then you have something to offer. Definitely when you then go into the therapies and you then start learning about these things, because you can combine all those things with your own life experience and you have something. It's not just a theory. A lot of things is also a practice. It comes from your life experience, which is valuable in itself.
Yeah, I mean, I that's all valid. There are elements to that which are just your beliefs, as you quite rightly said. So, and everybody's different. So you talk about the 50-year-old guy doesn't want a 24-year-old psychologist. That may be true, but what about the 18-year-old girl and getting an old 60-year-old man? She might think, well, this guy's just totally disconnected with life as well. So it's not like, again, it's not black and white thinking. If for you need that, then find a therapist who's fit, young, or middle-aged, you know, whatever, you know, sorry, not young, but, you know, middle-aged, whatever it is that ticks your boxes, then you find that. And that's why there are so many therapists out there. I think it's mistaken to say that all therapists should be a particular way, or they can't be overweight or any of that kind of stuff. I think it's whatever works for each client. And if you're clear on what works for you, then you go in that direction, and a different client will go in a different direction. They just need to feel the rapport. So yeah, I'm always wary of kind of hard and fast rules. But yes, if you want like a general concept, I would agree that if someone has no life experience, it's going to be tricky for them to understand, you know, a wide range of different clients.
And to empathize. It's very hard to empathize with your client if you haven't been through anything similar.
No, I agree.
Let me take the conversation to a little different area. As regulations loosens around the world on psychedelics, many documentaries are popping up where people are using psychedelics, mushrooms, LSD, ayahuasca, whatever, to improve themselves. And the reports coming back is that with one night of LSD, these people feel like they've done the equivalent to 10 years of therapy. Do you have any thoughts on this? Do you have any first experience with these drugs, if you don't mind my asking? And second, if you do, would you recommend them or tell people to stay away, or do you have an opinion on the matter?
I would say my opinion is probably slightly different in a recording than it would be off a recording. You know, ethically, obviously, I can't recommend all of that kind of stuff, and I don't. But I'm obviously well aware of all that kind of theory and those experiences. I have had experiences that have been not great and others better. So again, it depends on the individual. Those kind of things can be enlightening and they can be traumatic as well. You know, you can have a really eye-opening trip and kind of have amazing clarity, or you can get sunk into the depths of, you know, of hell, if you're spinning out on a bad trip. So, you know, I think it's moderation and with great care, because there are also pretty nasty examples of ayahuasca as well. People, you know, losing their lives and sort of going off the, you know, off the cliff sort of thing. So, with extreme moderation, it would be my answer.
Could you imagine a future where these things become one of your tools? That if you see a patient that may benefit from one of these things, you could recommend him, if it's legal now, do some mushrooms?
I would say in my case, not in the immediate future because of the risks involved. Even if it's 80% successful, there's still 20% not, or 90-10 or whatever it is.
Because you lose control over the patient too, right?
Exactly.
Or the client.
Exactly. And I think you're liable for whatever happens.
True.
And, you know, in a session, you know what you're doing. You're always within the limits of risks and ethics and stuff like that. This actually relates to what you were saying. You know, is a person worthy of being a psychologist? And it is a good point. And the way I wanted to do it with my studies was a UK-based study where the courses are approved by associations and bodies that you can be a part of, and that gives you a kind of stamp of approval. Therapists, as opposed to psychologists, no one owns that word. So I can say I'm a therapist and without doing any studies, or any approved studies. You know, you could do just like a one quick sort of online 6-week course and just say, oh, I'm a therapist now. And that
coach.
Yeah, or a coach, exactly. So there's no legal, you know, requirements officially for those words as it stands. So I wanted to do things that were approved. I wanted to do things that I could belong to a body, and then I'm accountable. So if somebody has a complaint about me, and that's clarified before we start, there's a thing usually called a contract. I call it a therapeutic agreement. I think it's softer. But it's just some sort of conditions and, you know, a little bit about the therapy, and it talks about my association, gives an email, there's a link to the code of ethics, and it's open and honest in terms of if you're unhappy, this is who you contact. And I think that gives the client a certain amount of trust, in that, you know, that person is accountable and I know who to contact if not. It's not just some random person. So I think when choosing a therapist, it's also kind of useful to see, you know, if they are part of a body, you know, if they are, they can be checked on. You can make a phone call. Has Laurent ever had any complaints? No. Great. I'll push on.
And what about the fact, because you have a psychologist, of course, psychiatrist, and people who now as a psychologist or psychiatrist are like researching the psychedelics in a way that they can do therapy with these things. Like the tools you have as a psychologist are basically the different therapies you have without any drugs, right? So no psychedelics and no normal drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that like is that enough? Like how many and how do you deal with the people? Because there have to be also people, I imagine, that you cannot help or they cannot help themselves in the context of the therapy. Mm-hmm. Like do you think these psychedelics or other medicine, like regular medicines, can be cannot the amount of people be increased by quite a bit if you would add these kind of things?
I mean, I'm never going to give medication to people. I'm not a doctor. I don't believe in that. That's not to say that I don't see the benefit in extreme cases, extreme personality disorders, etc. That it has a benefit short term. The problem is that they're incredibly addicted. So, you know, it becomes a crutch, just like everything else is, just like drinking, drugs, sex, even gambling. Well, you know, what people lean on to get some kind of joy from life, you know, they can become a crutch, and that can be dangerous. So I believe in skills, not pills. It's teaching people. Yeah, it's teaching people how to better know themselves and to rely on themselves and to trust themselves. And that's really important. Understanding that they actually have the capacity to overcome what they're going through. That's the hardest thing, to trust themselves and not lean on these other crutches. That doesn't mean that it's all or nothing. Again, it's not black and white thinking, but I see humans as a bell curve, right? And the huge majority are under the bell. And of course you have outliers. I probably can't treat those outliers, certainly in terms of medication. Perhaps they need a different type of treatment. Perhaps not, but I'm a strong believer in what I do, because I've seen the benefits of people coming to me and saying, I think I'm a sociopath. I think that, I've read on personality disorder, and I'm definitely borderline personality disorder. I am bipolar, all this kind of stuff. And by the end of the sessions, I say, what do you think about that? And they go, no, it's nonsense. So it's, those labels can be really, and again, I'm not speaking in about everyone, okay, but they can be a noose around people's necks. And the problem with reading online is that, people can see, the symptoms and think, oh, that's me. And I, if I'm being completely honest, you go back 10, 12 years, I could have been any of those things that I've just mentioned, or ADHD, all these things that are thrown around. And so what I believe is in, let's try and avoid labels. I don't say we're doing CBT now, or psychodynamics, or that I'm using a person-centered approach, or what, this is more holistic. So holistic, we might use that term, but, I don't kind of talk about that. I just see a human, and I'm another human, and we work through stuff. And that's my approach. So psychedelics, medication, definitely not. Psychedelics, let's talk in another 5 years. Yeah. If that's becoming prevalent and it's shown to be super useful, then it could be an option. I would say right now I would steer clear, because I'm more about the skills. Yeah. And it's what I think is really empowering is having people lean on themselves, because that's the only thing you can 100% control. You're the only person that's going to be with you every single day of your life. That's a fact. So your relationship with yourself is super important. The quality of our lives is based on the quality of our relationships, and people think that's with other people, but no, with yourself. That's so important. So understanding yourself, self-awareness, which comes through self-reflection, leads to self-regulation. You then know what you have to do in order to be happy, right? And then self-sufficiency, really important. So independence and responsibility. I don't want clients to be with me forever. I don't want clients to be with me even for, say, a year. It's all about, let's get you out into the real world, understanding and trusting that you are enough. And then if you want to take some mushrooms on the weekend, that's fine by me. No, that's your thing. And if occasionally that helps you with whatever, that's fine. I mean, I can think of a couple of people already that obviously I can't mention, but, leaning on certain things. And, my aim is to take that away, that necessity, that belief that they need that for clarity or anything like that. For me, anything external is nice to have, and it's a bonus. Even a beer, it's nice to have a beer, but I don't need the beer to be happy. No. We need to be actualized, like you said. We need to be fulfilled. We need to be nourished. Our cup needs to be full. No. And then other stuff happens. And that's the same in relationships, of course. We need to be good, happy, solid. And then the other person is good, happy, solid, balanced, etc. And then together you create this extra thing, which is wonderful. No. But if you need that person for your self-worth, for your validation, to feel good about yourself, then it becomes incredibly destructive. So in, summing up, I believe strongly in the individual and the power and the strength and the capacity of each individual, and everything else is kind of secondary.
So the tools of the psychologist that are currently available, you would say, are enough for most cases in the bell curve?
Yeah, I mean,
or for you, or you would say, like, for psychologists in general?
That I can't talk about. Yeah. That would be unprofessional to start telling other people what to do. I wouldn't dream of that. And actually, that's one of the things that slightly bugs me. Some people are so tied into their approach, and that bothers me. Because there is no right or wrong. I started this off by saying I'm not right. This is just what works for me and for my clients, and that's all I care about. My clients are happy. Yes, one or two do I look back and think, we didn't get to where we really could have got to, and that bothers me, because I'm slightly a perfectionist, and I would like to be able to help absolutely everyone, but again, vast majority happy, and that's what matters. And in those cases, like you said earlier, sometimes they're not ready to help themselves. You can be the best, and I'm not saying I'm the best therapist in the world, but the individual has to be ready and willing to challenge themselves, and that's hard for people sometimes.
Rock bottom, as you said earlier, that's when you changed. For me, the same. I've had 2 rock bottoms, and I think both of the times is when I changed the most. And I like to listen to a spiritual teacher called Anthony de Mello, who has been a psychologist, and he is also like a spiritual teacher / leader. And what he said is sometimes feels the conflict from within, because he says as a psychologist, people come to you, and some people, they're looking to fix, like have like a band-aid on a specific problem, like fix me so I can continue my life.
Mm-hmm.
And as a spiritual teacher, he says sometimes what these people actually need, what I feel they need, is they have to be pushed more in towards the bad behavior or the bad pattern, so that they actually come to the point that they can or want to change. So I think, like you said, these people always exist that you cannot help, because you're just there to basically give the tools. But if someone's not ready to change, then they cannot change.
100%. And the Band-Aid thing is really true. The Band-Aid and the quick fix and you fix me, all those things are not certainly how I operate. It's you fix yourself, and I'm going to be there. I'm going to hold your hand, and I'm with you all the way. But this is about you. Obviously, we play an incredibly important part in that journey, but it's about them understanding it's their responsibility and their journey, right? And also the Band-Aid obviously doesn't bring about long-lasting, deep-level change. That's again what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in you feel fine for a few weeks and then you come back again. I always say to people, and we always joke, it's not a good business model. I don't want people coming back. I don't want people being there long term, because I'm an ethical therapist.
Yeah.
But it's about going to the root cause, because if you put a little plaster on top, like having a drink or whatever your crutch is, and it goes away temporarily, then it's going to come back. If we go to the root cause and it doesn't come back, and that's really important. And what you say is right. It doesn't need to be painful and hideous and traumatic, but it can be, and people need to be obviously aware that can be part of the process. It does mean sometimes going back and revisiting and curing and grieving certain traumatic experiences so that they no longer have a weight over us. And unless we do that, sometimes it's not going to get better. And there are people that simply don't want to do that. They're not ready to do that, or they're not bringing their authentic selves. You can see that they're sort of saying what they think sounds right, but it's not kind of really, and that's tricky, and then, that, and it happened quite recently. You have to challenge a person and say, look, what do you want from this? What's the point? I don't want to take money for no reason. I have no interest in this. This isn't about, I don't do this. If I wanted money, I'd still be producing. It's not about finances. It's about, helping people to get to where they want to go. And if that's not happening, then you have to kind of sit down and have a conversation and go, well, what's going on here? Why? What are you getting out of this? And is this what you really want? And that can be tricky for people. And it's the bit that's probably hardest for me, is that challenge sometimes to kind of look someone in the eye and go, hey, what's going on here? Because I look, my default setting is the supportive, nice, sort of kind, but sometimes you do have to push. And, as you said, it's about what the therapist believes is right for that person. And the other thing to bear in mind is maybe I'm just not the right fit. It's not about, hey, I can do this for everyone. I mean, I'm happy that there is a good, let's say, happiness rate or whatever you want to call it. But, perhaps my voice, perhaps my energy isn't right for that person. And that's absolutely fine. And, it's always about what the client needs. And if the client needs somebody else, then that's fine. The caveat to that is, if someone's jumping around from therapist to therapist, it's sometimes a bit of a red flag that they're not looking at number one, as opposed to, well, he's no good, she's no good, they're no good, and it's kind of like, well, look inside.
I would like to propose something, and you can absolutely say no to this. Please don't take it as an ambush or anything similar. But basically, to give the people listening an idea on how you operate, I would love to tell you a little bit about a breakthrough I had a couple of nights ago, and basically get your feedback, if you like.
Yeah, I think it's hilarious when someone says it's not an ambush.
It's not an ambush, but but cancels everything.
Please don't see this as an ambush, but
it definitely is not. And please,
it's like saying don't take this the wrong way, but and you know that an insult's coming.
with all due respect, but
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead. Please tell.
So a couple of nights ago, I was suffering a little bit from insomnia. So I couldn't sleep throughout the whole night. Whenever I slept, it was this very light sleep where you kind of are in a dream state, but kind of awake, and you definitely do remember all the dreams you're dreaming. And to give you a little bit of background, I suffer from bruxism, which is when you clench your teeth, and have been for a while. This has affected my whole body. I have a lot of tension within my body. During this night, I noticed a theme within my dreams, which was basically resolving past traumas. Fights with my brother, my father, my mother, people that had wronged me, basically releasing inner tension towards shitty situations I had been through, or I made up in my mind to basically deal with these situations. What I realized when I wake up is this all stems from when my parents got a divorce. I kind of was the middleman, and the belief at the moment, even if it's not true because I was a 12-year-old kid, was that if I couldn't kind of make the things work between my parents, it would be my fault if it breaks up, which eventually did. They broke up, and even though I carried this with me subconsciously, I carried the belief within that if I somehow not resolve this conflict peacefully, it will be my fault if it all turns to shit. And then I noticed a theme throughout my life. I had some panic attacks years afterwards, which were basically because I wasn't facing up to the person I needed to face up, or I had issues with friends, with families, with girlfriends, where it basically, or at work even, and when I was working in advertising, I had some issues with very tough bosses, and instead of drawing a line in the sand and going like, this is enough, I just kept taking until my body reacted in a shitty way, which was pain. Having realized this, having created this awareness, and also to put something more on top, this also affects my romantic relationships. It's very hard to be romantic with somebody when you think, I don't know how to say this, or I don't know where the idea is, but when you kind of need to trust fully the other person, but you still think that it's up to you to make this work perfectly, and if it doesn't work, then it's your fault, blah, blah, blah. So it's like a circle, right? The cool thing I got out of this night, I actually woke up, I wrote stuff down in my diary, I cried a little out of happiness because finally I had come to the root of it all. The cool thing is now I do have the awareness of what's happening when I'm reacting in a specific way. Let's say I have a client who's being a douchebag. Now I know I have to draw a line or I will keep eating this shit. What I wanted to ask you is, how do I make this go away forever, if there's a way? How do I clean this trauma out of my system? How do I not react like this anymore? Let's say there's a conflict, or let's say a past thing that's still bothering me. How do you wash this out?
Okay, it's a great question. I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking, where's my notepad? Because like when I work with clients, I just like to jot stuff down because there was so much good stuff, and I want to always make sure I don't forget when I'm feeding stuff back to people. The first answer.
Remember, we're recording. I can send you the video later.
Yeah, we can. There's a few good things. Firstly, obviously, how does this, how do people with trauma get over it forever? The magic question. Obviously, it depends on the individual. 100%. That's not me squirming out of giving you an answer. That's the number one rule, certainly with how I operate. So I need the context of the person. As it happens, I kind of
know each other.
So that's the first thing I would say.
To give some context, we worked together many, many years. We've become friends, and we talk about this stuff and many other stuffs. And yeah, we know each other.
And you gave me some great advice. I always remind you this.
Thank you.
Before I was in this world of therapy, you gave me some wonderful advice that helped me at an important time. In terms of you, the first thing I would say is wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Because I think, and if you don't mind me saying this, I think this kind of thing, breakthrough clarity, has probably been lacking and necessary in terms of, I guess, your happiness, your well-being, relationships, even. You talk about those things, and I think getting clarity on where some of these things come from, the physical side of things. For me, it was always clear as a friend that there was something. What that something was, who knew?
Same here.
Exactly.
I've been searching for it for years.
But that kind of thing normally takes time, right? So with a client, you're working to try and get to the root and to get some clarity and get some breakthroughs and get to some moments of aha. So it's great that you've got that. In terms of an answer, that also takes time. That also takes more context, and not the context of a friend. That comes with the context of therapy. And that's why you don't, for me anyway, in terms of the question you're asking me, that's why you don't do therapy with friends, because the process is very different. And you have to go to places that maybe you wouldn't push a friend, or maybe you would, it depends, but it's very different, and you have to challenge that person. And that's difficult if you're just meeting for a beer every now and then. Do you know what I mean? So it's a tricky one to answer. What I would say is 100% try and sit with that now that you have the clarity. 100% try and express. You said you shed tears. I think that's wonderful. There's a thing called, have you ever read about parentification?
No.
That would be quite interesting. In fact, I can send you a link,
Sure.
An article on that. And it's just about how, children before their time are forced into adult roles in terms of you being the go-between, and the pressure that the effect that had on you. And just understanding, like you said, that awareness is a huge step. So now when you're reacting, you're not just reacting. There's a part of you going, hang on, I know I do this. This is a sensitive thing for me. This is a trigger. And that helps temper the reaction. So the self-awareness is already like a really, really important step. Expressing that emotion can send you a couple of things actually now thinking about it. But, like the egg, we are like an egg, and you cut the top off and life goes into that egg. Unless we have a little tap to release, the egg cracks.
Oh.
So life goes in, past life as well, but unexpressed emotions. Have you fully expressed everything from that time? And I don't mean going to talk to mum and dad or whatever it is, but I mean in terms of how do you release that pain? How do you release that hurt? How do you release that pressure?
How do you though?
Well, this is what we need to figure out.
Okay.
I can't give you
No, but it's more what I'm asking, is it specific to each person? Each person needs to find a different release, or do we all have a universal faucet where you can just...
No. I mean, things that are generally useful, things like meditation, things like slowing down, things like being as opposed to doing all the time, things like, switch the phone off and just connect with yourself. That kind of stuff, tends to help. Boxing, I know you're into, that's a release. There's many different things that help different people. And that is what the exploration is within therapy. It's what out of all of this is going to work. And there are dozens and dozens of exercises that I kind of, I have at my disposal, which, with each individual, I'll think, based on that, this could work. And they don't always work, but that's what the exploration is. We've tried that, didn't work. And also it didn't work today. Sometimes a few weeks later, you kind of go back to that and it does, because now they're more open to it. Now they're more willing and able to change existing habits, because, what you are today is a habit. It's a habit. This is how you think. This is how you feel. This is how you do. And it's about breaking habits. And that takes a little bit of time, and it takes some discipline, and it takes patience. It takes a willingness as well. I think perhaps, if you don't mind me saying publicly, there was less of a willingness, like perhaps consciously there was a willingness. Like you said, we talk a lot about these things, but I think emotionally less so. And emotionally, there was perhaps more of a blockage, which from what it sounds like, there's been a little release of that.
Yes, 100%.
So, it's about emotionally tapping in. It's about being vulnerable. It's about embracing every side, the holistic things, right? The rational, the emotional, the physical, the spiritual, volitional. Are we doing what we want to do every day? Are we happy? Are we doing in our weekly schedule? Are we doing things for us, or are we just doing things for our bosses and our friends and our family? All that kind of stuff. But the emotional is a huge part of that. What are you doing emotionally for yourself in the week? How often do you give yourself time emotionally just to sit and be? Maybe
Lately, quite a lot.
Well, that's good. Maybe try a photo exercise is quite good. You look at an old picture from that time and you just sit with it and see what it brings up. And does that stir up emotions? Does that, bring a little emotional release? Like that's an exercise, for example, that you could try.
You said you have many different ways of methods at your disposal. Have you tried all of them yourself? And if so, what is for you as a person, as a human being, like which ones have worked for you?
That's a brilliant question. Have I tried every single one? Quite possibly. I wouldn't put my hand in the fire, but I think at some point, yes, because things like meditation, things like yoga, things like stretching, exercise, I implement those things, maybe not every day, but most of the time. I have changed how I eat. I don't drink anymore.
So you live what you preach, huh?
Yeah, I think that's really important. If you're a hypocrite, I think people can sense that, and I think it hinders the process. I think one thing that all my clients, and probably most of my friends, will say is that I'm quite transparent. Even this morning.
Yes.
Oh, it's going to be filmed. Oh, I didn't know that.
I hadn't let Laurent know that we were filming this, and when I did, it pissed him off. I saw it in his face that a little.
It bothered me not knowing, so that I wasn't prepared. But as I said to you, it's going to be fine. I just, I
give us a little wave.
Yeah. So we all have our insecurities, our fears, and I'll give you the acronym. A really good acronym for fear now, which is really cool for people who suffer from anxiety and insecurity and worry. And what we implement helps us manage that. And I'm not saying to people, you can't eat burgers or you can't go out on the lash. It's just what happened to work for me. And it's not like I will never drink again. 2-3 times in the year, I'll have a drink. It's my partner's birthday next weekend, so we will probably have some kava. It's not like a stringent thing, but I know what's good for me. In fact, I have it tattooed. You know what's good for you. That was 15 years ago when I was in my rock bottom, and I was like, dude, you know what's good for you.
Why do you keep fucking up?
Exactly.
Right?
So,
We've all been there.
I mentioned it when I think maybe about the drinking. I can't remember what the context was, but it was like I realized for years, I've been doing things that are not, I forget, I think maybe it was a WhatsApp thing, but I remember an exchange along these lines of, I know, I need to now do the things that are good for me. And that's again the responsibility that we have. It's not about, such and such happened and therefore I feel shit. It's, and this is a CBT thing about ABCs. It's A, activating event, B, belief, C, consequence. So an activating event doesn't generate C, the consequence. It's the beliefs we have around it, and this is what actually one of the things you told me, that famous advice is if you expect other people to have your values, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. And that's really, really important. We have control. We can regulate how we feel. And that's really, really important because people tend to come to therapy with a certain sense of helplessness. And actually that's not the case. And as we said before, it's about getting people to trust in their own capacity to achieve their goals. It's not about other things and external things. You have that power, you have that capacity. And just to talk about the acronym FEAR, F-E-A-R, false evidence appearing real. And that's a really cool thing, because quite often the fear, the fight or flight, the adrenaline, the panic, oh gosh, there's going to be a camera. It's not actually real. There's not actually a big black bear about to eat me. I'm not in the forest and about to die. It's false evidence appearing real. You fear things and you believe what you're thinking and feeling in that moment, but it's not actually true, or certainly not to the extent and the intensity with which you're feeling it. And that false evidence appearing real is a really cool thing for people to bear in mind, that when anxiety is kicking in, what's actually going on? What's the reality here? I know that I fear, like a meeting, right? You're going to fall flat on your face and you're going to forget everything that you're going to say, which to some degree is what, I was thinking this morning, but I know that's not the case. That's the insecure, hurt child. That's the vulnerable, fragile part that we all carry, which every now and then
it's gonna flare up.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I consider myself, I can say with genuine, with honesty, I'm a happy, balanced, stable person today. But that doesn't mean that I never, ever feel anxiety or worry. Of course not. That would be absurd. But I have the tools in place to understand when it's happening and to manage it and regulate that, so that it doesn't spiral into coming here and not being able to speak. It's so, that's really important for people who suffer from anxiety, is understanding that what's actually going on in that moment is not what they believe. And that belief thing is really important. Like, I'm not good enough, I will fail, that kind of thing. It's not always conscious, but that kind of belief around self-esteem, about being good enough, about being worthy, that tends to hide behind a lot of the unpleasant emotions that we feel in life. And you talked about this, you talked about the blame, right? It's your fault. You weren't good enough. You didn't fix it. It's, that whole weight emotionally is incredibly tough, and especially on a kid, because as a 12-year-old,
making choices for me today, that's what
you don't have the emotional maturity at that stage. It's incredibly unfair, and it's not.
The person still makes choices. That's what I'm getting at. Like, sometimes with our past traumas, which happened at age 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, you still base choices today at your 40s, 50s, 60s 100%. On stuff that happened when you were 3.
100%. And that, again, if you want to look up, so parentification is a good one. Transactional analysis is another good one. So parent, child, adult, the voices in our heads, right? If that child hasn't gone through and sanado, how would we
healed.
Yeah, healed, exactly. Healed the trauma from that moment, it's always going to be present. So at some point you need to go back and talk to that child and have a word and say everything's going to be all right, and give them everything that child didn't have, which was probably in that moment, warmth and love and forgiveness and trust and all these kind of things that a child need. And I'm not saying you didn't have that as a child, but in that moment you were left without some of those things, and that person needs a hug. That person needs to be told everything's going to be okay, so that it doesn't control you. And when you talk about decision making, that's really cool as well, because according to transactional analysis, we have these 3 voices. So sometimes there's a stricter, harsher parental voice. Do this, do that, shut up, get on with it, don't be silly, that kind of voice, right? And then there's the child, so the 12-year-old child saying, I don't, that kind of voice, right? Saying, oh, I don't know, or I'm scared, or I'm worried, and then the adult, which is when we do attain emotional maturity, hopefully as we age and we mature, then we have the emotional intelligence to say, I hear you, harsh voice, inner critic, self-doubt sometimes, and then I hear you, hurt, vulnerable child, but I got this now. I'm driving now, and that's your adult decision. This is what I'm going to do in this moment, rather than be reactive and defensive, which might be what the child, would do, or rather than be harsh on yourself as a parent might be, then you're the sort of balanced adult voice.
What if we add a third layer? Like, we make the third layer consciousness. Like, do we have to be the parent listening to the child, or the consciousness evaluating the needs of the adult, of the parent, and evaluating the needs of the child, and then basically based on their current situation, like feeling what you need right now. Sometimes you need to be a little bit of a child possibly, and otherwise maybe you need the discipline of being an adult or making the adult decision.
But that's still your decision. Do you see what I mean? In that moment, if you need a hug and you're fragile and you're sensitive and you need love and support, as an adult, you can say, right now, this is what I need. I've listened to these voices and this is what I need right now. And you can say that in a relationship, for example. I'm sensitive today. Please understand that. I just, I'm not on form or whatever it is, but you're controlling that. You're deciding that. You're not being dragged along like the passenger in a car. You're writing the script to your life. So it's still a conscious decision to go, and the other thing to remember here is, first of all, these are all theories, right? This is not right and wrong, or these are just theories. But also, it's okay to fail as well. If one day you act like a kid and you're sensitive and you get defensive, hey, that happens. What's important is what you do next. You hold your hand up and say, look, my bad, sorry. And you own that. And if you've behaved perhaps in an unpleasant manner because of an emotional reaction, that's okay. We're human beings. We're not robots. And that's not the aim, to become this sort of perfect sentient being that never, ever makes a mistake. No, we can be kind and compassionate to ourselves when we fall off the horse. We just get back on and try again next time and learn from that mistake and apologize to anyone we may have hurt in the process, rather than, no, I did nothing wrong. It's all your fault. That then the child still, takes over and has the power. What we want at some point is to go, okay.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of different definitions then, because what I was trying to get at is that, for example, you want to eat the child in you, or like the animalistic and thing in you wants to eat 3 chocolate bars, or like the ice cream, a tub of ice cream, right? And the adult in you says like, yeah, you better not, because you're gonna feel bad. So these two impulses, I would say, like, I see then you could define yourself as the adult, evaluating both the voice of the adult and the voice of the child, and put that agency within the concept of the adult. But I think we mean the same. I just say there's many inner voices, and the adult and the child, and there's probably many even like different tendencies inside of us, different wants, different needs, different desires. And I would say to take it up to more of a, because that decision can be very good to be like, eat a tub of ice cream and feel, it can be good to do that and feel bad and accept that, or it can be also good at the same point to make the adult decision. But I would say like the level higher would still be evaluating these multiple voices inside you. That's what I was trying to get.
You mean like an onlooker from above?
Basically.
Checking out all these voices?
Because for me, adult, but that's maybe how I look at the term adult, means making the right quote-unquote decision, what is good for you. But then we have just a different definition, I guess, of...
I think you're both talking about...
It's also important not to get too lost in, that paralysis through analysis kind of thing. There's also, the ID, the ego, the superego. Yeah. There's lots of different, it's just about whatever works for you. And when you're with a client and you're talking through stuff, all you're trying to do is work out what works for that person. Yeah. So if I feel that in a given moment talking about parentification might be useful, then I'll bring that up. Yeah. Or if I think that talking about that sort of parent, adult, child thing might work for them, then I'll bring that up. But it's not, hey, everyone, this is what it is. These are all theories. Freud had some theories. Some people look at some of those theories today and go, well, that's nonsense. It's just opinion. It's just theory. So, these are just kind of concepts that exist, and I mentioned them because we're talking about stuff, but it's not like a hard and fast, hey everyone, buy into this and buy into this and buy into this. They're concepts that exist, and then with each person we'll talk about, I don't talk about transactional analysis with every client at all. It's just an idea.
I was just trying to clarify that I think we mean the same thing, but in different we have different definitions. Exactly.
Let's say somebody's at home right now and they're saying, this is cool. I want this. I need this. How do they get in touch with Baldoni Therapy? I know you're based in Barcelona and you live here. I don't know if you do video therapy at the same time.
Yes, actually, quite a lot of my client base is not in Barcelona. So Zoom calls works. So I have a lot of UK clients, North America. I had a client in Greece. I'm just trying to think now, but and in other cities in Spain. So the people who aren't in Barcelona will do remotely, and the people in Barcelona we do face to face.
So they should enter your webpage, which is
BaldoniTherapy.com.
or maybe Instagram. I don't know if you have an Instagram.
You know me.
No, I didn't remember honestly. I thought you didn't. But.
I have zero social media. I am completely offline. I love living offline. We've got into that subject probably too late because I could speak for an hour about it, social media and my thoughts on that. But again, it's a personal opinion. But no, what's great as well is because I think to date, only one person has been like a genuinely random person. Pretty much everyone I get is client recommendation.
Wow.
And the good thing about that is that there's already a rapport, there's already a trust, because whoever's coming, there's been a positive outcome for someone they know, which is obviously really good. And also for me, the fact that they know each other also means there's a greater probability of a connection and being able to help them, because if they're friends with this other person
and you were able to help that guy,
exactly, then it's more likely that he or she will, that we will also kind of be able to flow in that therapeutic sense. So that's really cool. And it's also kind of very satisfying to do it without any kind of social media and online presence, because I believe so strongly in the sometimes destructive power of social media. It's quite nice to kind of stick the middle finger up to that world, and to anyone,
you can go.
And to everyone that thinks that,
I think we all agree on this table.
but it's nice, for people to know that you don't need that. When you're setting up a business, people will go, well, you've got to have Instagram, you've got to have, LinkedIn, and you've got to have...
I remember you were even doubting about setting up a
website. Yeah, I didn't want a website. And in fact, I didn't need the website. I was already, I had my client base without the website. But actually, I did the website because I thought it'd be cool to have cards. And, it would kind of be ridiculous to have a card
with nothing on it.
Just a number, maybe. And I didn't even want to give a number out in Italy. It's you talk about how we each become sort of happy and find that stability. For me, living offline, I turn my phone off at 8 p.m. most nights. If there's maybe a football match or something, I might look at the score. But 8 p.m. and 9 a.m. I turn on my phone pretty religiously. And that's been a massive influence. I'm not saying that for everybody. I think that kind of thing would be helpful to a lot of people, because I think people do tend to spend a bit too much time on their devices. But for me, that was like a big thing. And being kind of disciplined about that, because initially it's a habit. You're kind of like, oh my gosh, this feels weird. The phone's there, I switch it off, but it's kind of around, and you just have that habit of
checking
instinctually. Yeah. And actually very quickly, it became, because you feel the effect very quickly. You feel the effect of that disconnection. Initially, there's a bit of tension and you're missing that dopamine, right? Which is what everyone lives off these days in society, those dopamine hits of validation, of likes and comments and all that kind of stuff, or hearts, or whatever it is that kids do these days.
But kids do these days. We're not that old around yet.
This reminds me of a funny thing. I was on a group to do something. I don't want to mention it yet because we're sort of keeping it under wraps. And there was a few different people on that group, and one of the people said, everybody respond via emoji if you're going to attend the next meeting. And I wrote back saying, I don't use emojis.
Oh.
And they said, well, just use one. And I said, no. So I did my the old smiley face, the colon and the bracket.
That's where you draw the line.
It's like,
I will not use emojis.
I just thought it was quite funny because, like, some of this stuff, and I'm sure some people at home will think, well, that's absurd, and same with eating or not drinking and all that kind of stuff. And it's not like this kind of religious culty thing. It just, all these things naturally, very slowly happened and just sat right. I've got no issue with people being on WhatsApp and, using emojis. But it's just, for me, it became this thing.
Emoji.
No! It's like, I don't judge people, but it became a thing. And now I find it quite funny that I kind of like, to the point of, no, I'm really not going to.
It circles back of what you mentioned before, that to whatever works for you.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously slightly tongue-in-cheek now. It's become like a bit of a joke. It's not
I know.
It's not like I'm going to I feel like I'm going to burn up and get destroyed if I put a actual smiley face in cartoon form. But it's just quite nice resisting that kind of thing. And there's always been a part of me that was
rebel.
Yeah, exactly. And it's nice to not to lose that.
How are we feeling?
I was just saying, like, in the end, you, like, I think the important thing is to draw the line. And wherever you want to draw the line, if it feels good, if that's who you are, if you're that person who doesn't want to use emojis, that's perfectly fine, And that's also something really good for a lot of people to realize. Like, the line can be wherever you want it to be, and it can be as ridiculous as other people might think it is. But I mean, if that's who you are, then fuck it. Why not? So I respect that.
I agree.
That's awesome.
It's your freedom.
Exactly.
Well, it's authenticity as well, and
At least you're congruent.
Yeah.
In all aspects of your life.
I
There's
hope
no hypocrisy.
I hope not in your free time when you're alone on the couch. You're not suddenly doing emojis on your iPad to yourself.
When nobody's watching.
Exactly.
Just
What are you doing? I think
it's like a secret, a cheat day with the food. It's like
how you can do all the emojis
once a month.
I have a tub of ice cream, a chocolate coulant, which is my always my treat, and I write some emojis.
Exactly.
I just have a splurge, and then I get
of emojis. Well, Laurent, it's been a real pleasure to have you here. Thank you for everything you shared, for what you explained, for what you explained to me personally. I will definitely look up what you mentioned, please. I'll write you later so you can give me the exact names. And yeah, I like how, this is an honest opinion for myself, I like how you turned around your life. I'm very proud of you in this sense, because it's not an easy thing to do. And you hit the ground running, which is a double not easy thing to do, because leaving a well-paid, and it's well-paid people, job as a producer to start a life as a therapist, which may or may not be a lot of money, takes some balls. And I think courage is one of the main things lacking in today's world.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. It's nice to hear that from, some of the inner circle. And, looking back, I do feel pride as well. You look back on the journey and the studies and how hard that was, and doing multiple courses at the same time to try and get to that goal, and also going on film shoots at the same time. It was a hard struggle, and it's nice to know that you're out the other side and
everything worked out.
And everything worked out, and that you can also be a part of people's journey. That's a beautiful thing when you see people have that breakthrough, and you can send someone off into the world. A more stable, happy, balanced person. That's a nice thing.
Okay, and with this we wrap it up.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank
you for coming.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Eyes on Growth is an original podcast produced by Inkululeku Studios, hosted by Joshua Meulendijks and Luciano Ans, editing by Sofia Vicente. Thank you for listening.